interesting thing is that most of them are still connecting from Partridge Family, which absolutely amazes me.
Yeah.
And as you know, that when you appear in people's living room, they feel a connection with you.
David Cassidy was more than a teen idol. In the 1970s, he became a cultural icon, the face of a generation. All thanks to the immense popularity of the Partridge Family. His fame brought with it a whirlwind of adoring fans and women desperate for a moment with him. Yet, one person among them stood apart, his co-star, Susan Dey. She silently harbored a deep admiration for him from the sidelines, longing for him to see her as more than just a friend. When she finally confessed her feelings, the outcome was not the fairy tale romance fans had dreamed of. Instead, it was a fleeting encounter that left behind a trail of regret, heartbreak, and a broken friendship. In this video, we explore the poignant truth behind why David Cassidy later felt remorse for his one-night stand with Susan Dey. But first, if you're a David Cassidy fan or have a soft spot for classic westerns, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We regularly share compelling stories about Western stars and Hollywood legends of yesteryear. Born on April 12, 1950 in New York City, David Cassidy's father was Jack Cassidy, a charismatic Broadway star with matinee idol looks and a volatile temper. His mother, Evelyn Ward, was a talented actress and singer in her own right. To the outside world, they seemed like the quintessential perfect family, but behind closed doors, their lives were anything but. When David was just 6 years old, his parents quietly ended their marriage. His father soon married Shirley Jones, an up-and-coming actress who would eventually play his on-screen mother on The Partridge Family. The emotional blow of learning such a significant life event through public gossip was a wound that never truly healed for David. David spent most of his childhood with his mother in West Orange, New Jersey. Their life was far from glamorous. Evelyn tirelessly worked and took David to auditions to support them both. But his father's unpredictable presence loomed large, a storm that would drift in and out of David's life. Jack was a man of contradictions, charming yet narcissistic, brilliant yet cruel. His relationship with David was a pattern of prolonged silences, followed by sudden bursts of affection and praise. This erratic approval instilled in David a powerful drive to prove his worthiness, not just as a performer, but as a son. As a teenager, David wasn't academically inclined. Music and performing became his primary passions. In his late teens, he moved to Los Angeles, where he sought to enter show business through traditional means, attending acting classes, going to auditions, and hustling for small roles. His early credits included bit parts on popular TV shows like Bonanza, Marcus Welby, MD, and Ironside. With his good looks, cool demeanor, and quiet charisma, he stood out from the crowd. However, it was his 1970 casting as Keith Partridge in The Partridge Family that would change his life forever. In the early 1970s, The Partridge Family became a smash hit on American television. It was a musical sitcom about a delightful fictional family band, and the cast included two promising young stars, Susan Dey as Laurie Partridge and David Cassidy as her older brother Keith. On screen, they were siblings, but off-screen, their reality was far more complex. Susan Dey was a rising star, a stunning brunette whose grace and beauty captured the hearts of many young men. David Cassidy, on the other hand, was already a massive teen idol. With his youthful charm and musical talent, he became the heartthrob for an entire generation. His posters adorned bedroom walls across the nation, and fans swooned over his every televised appearance. Behind the curtain of fame and fan adoration, Susan was silently struggling with her feelings. She had developed a profound, unspoken infatuation with David. Even though they portrayed siblings, Susan found it increasingly difficult to separate the characters they played from her real-life emotions. Tragically for her, the feeling was not reciprocated. David always viewed Susan more as a kid sister than a potential romantic partner. Despite the age difference, they developed a strong friendship throughout the show's run. Cassidy genuinely cared for Susan in a brotherly way, often watching out for her. However, others on set weren't oblivious to Susan's obvious affection, especially Shirley Jones, who played the family matriarch, Shirley Partridge. As David Cassidy's real-life stepmother, Shirley understood him better than most. She noticed Susan's signs and grew concerned. Shirley gently pulled Susan aside more than once, advising her against becoming too emotionally invested. She was aware of David's emotional distance and didn't want to see Susan get hurt. But Susan was young, deeply smitten, and unwilling to be swayed. Since her warnings went unheeded, Shirley decided to intervene in a different way. She discreetly informed David that Susan had stronger feelings for him than he might have realized. David was initially surprised, but he cared for Susan and didn't want their friendship to end with the show. So, after the final wrap party for the Partridge family, he invited her to dinner. Afterward, he drove her to his old school, his alma mater, where they sat and talked for hours. Susan confided in him completely, sharing how difficult it had been to hide her feelings for him over the years. She was worried about the show ending and the future of their friendship. To preserve their connection, David promised to take her to Rancho, California, a quiet retreat he loved. But their time together there took an emotional turn. Susan made it clear that her feelings weren't just emotional. She desired something more, something romantic and physical. David was taken aback. He cherished her deeply, but only as a friend. Still, he didn't want to hurt her by rejecting her. According to Cassidy, they shared a kiss, watched some television, and eventually made out. But something didn't feel right to him. He didn't feel the same chemistry he had experienced with other women. By morning, they had been intimate, but the moment was awkward and brief, leaving both of them emotionally confused. That night was a turning point. Just as David had feared, their friendship was never the same. They stayed in touch for a few years, but slowly drifted apart. The closeness they once shared simply faded. Susan had hoped for a deeper connection, but it never materialized. Years later, however, they showed the world they could still reunite with dignity and humor. In 1990, the two briefly appeared on stage together to present a Viewer's Choice Award at the MTV Video Music Awards. Their playful exchange drew laughs and smiles, a nostalgic glimpse of the pair who had once brought the Partridge family to life. In his 1994 memoir, Come On, Get Happy, Fear and Loathing on the Partridge Family Bus, David Cassidy pulled back the curtain on his complex, turbulent life. The book was a raw and honest account. He opened up about his battles with substance abuse, his numerous affairs with famous women, and his emotionally charged relationship with his father, actor Jack Cassidy. But one of the most unexpected and painful parts of his story involved someone he had once held dear, his Partridge family co-star, Susan Day. Cassidy confessed that Susan had been the sister figure he had never had. They were incredibly close, so much so that he often confided in her about his romantic escapades, never realizing how painful that might have been for her. To him, she was his closest female friend, but to Susan, his casual remarks about other women felt like a sting, especially given her unspoken feelings for him. Things worsened when Cassidy publicly wrote about their brief romantic encounter, something Susan had always wanted to keep private. In the book, he even noted his disappointment that she wasn't more provocative, a comment that felt like salt in an old wound. Susan was devastated. She felt completely betrayed, calling the tell-all a tremendous, terrible violation. But she made one thing clear. The book didn't ruin their relationship because by then they no longer had one. Whatever bond they once shared had already been lost. Cassidy did attempt to make amends. He wrote her a heartfelt letter, hoping to rebuild their connection, but Susan never replied. By then, she had distanced herself not just from David, but from most of her former castmates. When VH1 contacted her for a Partridge family documentary, she refused to be interviewed. Whether Susan and David ever reconciled before his death remains unknown. By the mid-1970s, the Partridge family had ended, and so had the peak of David Cassidy's fame. He was no longer the heartthrob everyone was chasing. In an effort to shed his teen idol image, David pursued more serious roles, performing in Broadway shows and made-for-TV movies. But Hollywood struggled to see beyond the glossy image of Keith Partridge. he found himself typecast and struggled to secure roles that showcased his range as an actor. Despite his best efforts, most of his work throughout the 80s and 90s consisted of stage performances and sporadic TV appearances. In the early 70s, David was one of the biggest stars in America. He sold out arenas, topped music charts, and earned millions. At one point, he was among the highest-paid TV actors of his generation. But like many young stars who get rich quickly, David believed the good times would last forever. He spent lavishly, buying expensive homes, flashy cars, and living an ultra-luxurious lifestyle. The real problems began after the spotlight faded. By the 1980s, the money was no longer flowing like it once did, but David's spending habits hadn't changed. He made risky financial decisions, investing in real estate and business ventures that failed. One of his most costly mistakes was a horse breeding farm that became a financial black hole. On top of that, he was drawn into lawsuits with former managers and advisors over unpaid fees. The fortune he once had was rapidly disappearing. One of the most painful financial blows came from the very show that had made him famous. Despite the Partridge family's global success, David claimed he received very little money from reruns or album sales. Young and inexperienced at the time, he had signed contracts that did not secure him a fair share of the long-term profits. In the 1990s, David tried to fight back by suing Sony Music for unpaid royalties. But the legal battle was long and expensive and did not end in his favor. Instead of winning back what he was owed, he ended up spending more on court and legal fees. Without a steady income from his past hits, David had to rely on touring and small roles just to stay afloat financially. But those gigs never came close to matching the heights of his former fame. David Cassidy's personal life was often as tumultuous as his career. In 1977, he married actress Kay Lenz, but their marriage lasted barely 2 years. Fame, pressure, and personal differences drove them apart. Then in 1984, David married Meryl Tanz, a horse trainer he had met during his equestrian pursuits. Their relationship seemed stronger, and in 1991 they welcomed a son, Boo Cassidy. But once again, the marriage unraveled, and the couple divorced in 1996. That same year, David married for the third time, this time to songwriter Sue Schifrin. Interestingly, they already shared a child, Katie Cassidy, born in 1986 from an earlier relationship. Though David was not actively involved in Katie's early upbringing, she would go on to find her own stardom, becoming a well-known actress with roles in Arrow, Supernatural, and Gossip Girl. David and Sue eventually separated and finalized their divorce in 2016, ending yet another chapter of emotional highs and lows. Despite all this, family remained a complicated but constant thread in David's life. He shared the stage of fame with his half-brothers Sean, Patrick, and Ryan Cassidy, each making their own mark in show business. While sibling rivalry and professional tensions occasionally arose, their mutual passion for music and performing kept them connected over the years. As David's public image faded, his personal demons began to surface in more troubling ways. One of the most visible signs of his decline was his struggle with alcoholism, which played out publicly through a string of DUI arrests. The most widely reported incident happened in 2010. Police in Sodak, Florida, noticed David's car drifting across lanes. When they pulled him over, he appeared disoriented, slurred his words, and was unable to pass the sobriety tests. A breathalyzer confirmed the truth. His blood alcohol level was nearly twice the legal limit. It wasn't his first time. David had already faced multiple drunk driving charges, but this one brought harsher penalties. He was sentenced to jail time, ordered to attend alcohol education classes, and placed on probation. The mug shot that followed told a heartbreaking story, a former teen idol with tired eyes and a weary face, a stark contrast to the youthful star millions once adored. David's fall from grace was no longer just about fading fame. It had become a public and painful unraveling. As his addiction worsened, David's reliability as a performer became increasingly questionable. Fans who paid to see him in concert often left disappointed when he either showed up visibly intoxicated or canceled at the last minute. In 2012, during a performance in California, he collapsed on stage and was rushed to the hospital, later revealing he had been suffering from severe dehydration and liver issues, clear signs of his body breaking down from years of alcohol abuse. Some fans felt betrayed, especially those who had grown up idolizing him. Many took to social media to express their frustration, accusing him of disrespecting his audience. Others, however, expressed sympathy, recognizing that his struggles were a cry for help rather than a lack of professionalism. In the final years of his life, David Cassidy's once charming public persona gave way to troubling signs of instability. What should have been reflective interviews about his legacy often turned into unsettling episodes. One such moment came in 2014 during a radio interview where David stunned listeners by claiming he had no relationship with his daughter Katie Cassidy and had never met her fiancé. The comment wasn't just shocking, it was deeply personal. Katie's response came swiftly and heartbreakingly through a single word on Twitter. Wow. Speechless. Behind the scenes, David's relationships were unraveling too. His once close connection with half-brother Sean Cassidy, himself a star of the late 70s, had grown distant. As David's behavior became more erratic, Sean reportedly pulled away for the sake of his own stability. The Cassidy brothers, Sean, Patrick, and Ryan, shared talent and fame, but not always harmony. The most heartbreaking fracture was with his daughter, Katie. Though Katie had carved her own path in Hollywood, David was often absent from her life. In his later years, he publicly admitted through tears that he never had a relationship with her. It was a moment of devastating honesty that underscored just how much damage had been done, not only to David's career, but to his role as a father and brother. His addiction, declining health, and mental struggles didn't just affect him. They left behind a wake of strained relationships, missed milestones, and emotional scars. On November 21, 2017, the world said goodbye to David Cassidy. He was 67 years old when he passed away from liver and kidney failure, the final toll of years battling addiction. In his final moments, family gathered by his side, offering comfort and presence as he slipped away. In the days before his death, David reportedly shared one last message of clarity, acknowledging his struggles with alcohol, but also recognizing the joy he had given to millions. Despite the chaos that shadowed his later years, he remained proud of his music, his role in the Partridge Family, and the powerful connection he once shared with fans around the world.